Okay.
Today, I want to use this opportunity to discuss the impact that the pandemic has had on multifamily and mixed use, especially in the NYC metro area. It's now almost been 2 years since the shutdowns, and the effects are still impacting many building owners today. You've been able to support many deals that typically the banks wouldn't touch. What are some of the deals that have come directly to you due to the pandemic?
Most banks, you're 100% right, would not touch these deals because there are a few banks out there that work on an asset-based lending program rather than the typical bank, which is all about cash flow.
Sure.
So let's start with that. So a couple of the deals, or a few of the deals I can think of was one, most recently we had a gentleman that I met and was introduced by my CPA. Because I'm president of a board of a condo association in the city, and he's the CPA for that firm. His client had a building in Tribeca that they owned for over 50 years. That's a long time, and a great building. I mean, it was spectacular. The building was worth, when he did his initial loan, appraised at about $19 million. So it was substantial. The problem was he had a great commercial tenant downstairs that, due to things like the pandemic, wasn't 100% the pandemic, went out of business.
Right.
And that tenant had a lease in place for $30,000 a month. Imagine $360,000 a year of cash flow was gone. So the rest of the building had about $350,000 of income between rents on residential, because this was a commercial space downstairs. But the overhead in the building was $275,000. So the net operating income, as what people look at, was $75,000 a year, which means it had very little value.
Sure.
So for the typical bank and the bank that he was with, they declined to support another mortgage. We shopped it, and if that wasn't enough, he had 2 Department of Building problems. So the first thing we had to do was go out to some of the expeditors that I knew and change the verbiage on the DOB problems to make sure that they were not severe. And then we got a bank to look at this deal, and it turned out that the guy had substantial assets there. The building was still appraised at around $10 million. So the loan that he was looking for $3 million was still only 30%. And he had the liquidity, which was important.
Okay.
Had the ability to pay the mortgage. So first of all, most banks don't touch it, doesn't support the income model. But this bank did it because he had the asset and the liquidity in order to do it, and we got him a $3 million loan at a pretty good price. It wasn't a hard money loan, and I think the loan was around 4.25%, which is reasonable.
For the NOI, that's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And what actually we're currently working on, the family owns 23 properties in the city, probably could be $125 or $150 million worth of property, and 2 of the properties are combined in one entity, have lost 15 residences due to the pandemic.
Everyone leaving the city.
Yeah. So the cash flow is horrible, and basically the banks won't touch it. But again, the banks that I'm working with have the same vibe, which is the guy has great credit. He has mortgages under $20 million, which means he has a low LTV based on all the product. We were able to get this gentleman, this family, a deal. The LTV is very low. They have good assets. They have great credit. So for a bank that's looking for an asset-based model, this is perfect. And for him, it's perfect because also it includes an interest-only loan, which will be less expensive than the loan he has now on the books. And once he rents the apartment, the 15 that are missing, we'll be able to get him a very aggressive deal. The other one that I'm thinking of, there was a co-op in the city, not a large co-op, but a very good co-op with high-end people living in the property, and not a lot. I think it was a small building, maybe it was only like 10 or 12.
But they're luxury units.
Luxury units. The ground floor was getting about $300,000 a year. Co-ops typically have these commercial spaces on the ground floor to offset some of the expenses in the building. This one was a lot, like $300,000 a year. They were there for about 30 years. They went out of business during the pandemic. So now they needed the money because this money was actually used to pay for the real estate taxes on the building. The other option would have been to go all the tenants in the place and raise, a capital assessment of a few
Right.
$100,000, which would not be easy. And also, how long would this go on? So it could be 600,000. We don't know.
And it's the pandemic. Nobody's looking to put in more money.
Right. So we got a bank to do the deal, lend them $1 million, interest only, up to 5 years if they chose. And once he gets another tenant in place, he'll cancel that.
Okay.
It's like a 1% prepayment penalty. The rate was really good, like 3.99%, and it was non-recourse, which is even, nobody had to sign for the loan. So it's great. It
I
worked.
really appreciate that about the liquidity source is you kind of look at the bigger picture with every deal, like how are you going to solve for a problem right now, and then even planning for in the future, having that it's a 1% prepayment penalty. It's just a very unique way of going about financing, and it's been very helpful for these pandemic related issues.
I think that our differentiator really is we don't go to a client and say we can get you a great loan at a great price and a great rate.
Right.
We go to the client and say, tell me about what you're trying to do. Tell me the challenges. What are the issues? So that we understand and drill down on everything. We try to deliver the best solution for the client. And that may not necessarily be the rate, especially now with the pandemic and non-revenue and moratorium on rents and moratorium on evictions.
Right.
It's something that you have to consider that they may not be able to go to a regular traditional bank or the bank that they're currently with and get the financing that they need. So that brings me to the last one that I can think of. And there was a woman that found a building in Brooklyn that was great. It used to be a bank building. It was $6.5 million. She paid all cash for it. So there's no loan on the building at all. But the problem with the building was it was partial residential, partial commercial, and they only had a little rent coming in, almost nothing. So she went to a number of banks, and the problem that she was having was no banks wanted to lend because no income was really coming in to support the loan.
Sure.
She needed about $2 million. She wanted to fix it up and get it rented. So we went and shopped it, and we found a deal for her for $2 million. The rate was a little bit higher. It was like 4.75%. Still not horrible interest only.
Not hard money.
Not hard money, right? Which is like, in fact, she told me that she went to somebody that wanted like 10% plus 2 points, and that's a little bit crazy. We got something in the fours, I think 4.75. And she got the interest only up to 2 years. And when she was finished with all the refurbishing and getting her tenants in place, again, at that point, we would get her a very aggressive rate with a very aggressive bank because she would have typically what the banks are looking for.
Right.
So that's basically what we do. We're a solution-driven commercial finance team. Our expertise is exactly this, and we find the solutions needed for the challenges that the clients really are having.
So many people I know left the city during the pandemic. We both work with G2D Group, a developer here on Long Island, and saw a massive spike in activity from the city with the Gateway Plaza project. Do you see a recovery for NYC?
Actually, I think as we sit, this is happening. The rental activity is super, although there's still some issues going on. Still there's the political climate, the crime, the transit. People have been avoiding the subways in Long Island. Even when I drove into the city the other day, it took me 2 hours to go in, 2 hours to get back because people are not just jumping on the trains. But I think with the new mayor, it sounds like he's going to make it safer so people feel that way. And I think New York's coming back.
You feel like over time it's New York City. You can't beat it down.
Can't beat it.
In the last few years, the banks have actually increased the way that they get information from an owner. Like now they want your checks to match the leases, and they've really changed their whole process. Have you seen anything get easier with them, or has it just been a real an adaptation process for you? So it's easier because you've been doing it.
I think that it, just like everything else in life, things change as you go on, and there's been a problem with the pandemic, and because of it, the landlords have been where they can sympathize with their tenants. They're trying to help them stay in business. They don't want to lose them because then they could have to go out to brokers and get lower rents, have T&I construction deals, have free rent. It's going to even cost them more. So they've been trying to work out deals with their existing tenants. All that being said, the banks must have the transparency. They could ask for the copy of the leases, but they have to know, are the leases being paid on time? And are they being paid the full amount? I mean, some people, like every business, they may be paying from their checking account, and yet the tenant's not paying the full rent. And do they have a deal? Is there a contract? So I think there's a little more transparency. But a lot of it still has to go with the appraisal of the asset. You know, is the asset strong, meaning the building?
Sure.
And does the client of the bank or the owner of these properties, what kind of position are they in? Liquidity? What does their global cash flow look like? Are they strong? So once they see all this, I think it's fairly easy to get the deal done, but I still think you need somebody that has the access to a number of banks and management if they want to get the right deal and the best deal.
100%. After chatting with you today and all of the news going on about inflation, how do you feel like that's going to impact the real estate world and investing?
I think that's a great question. I think that real estate has always been a great hedge to inflation.
Sure.
With inflation going up, I mean, the last quarter it's like 5 or 6%. So even if it stabilizes at 3 or 4%, that's a huge number. They talk about the inflation being higher than it's been in the last 30 years. The two safest investments right now in real estate, I'm told, is industrial, because you have a lot of places like Amazon, everybody with e-commerce, they need these industrial spaces, and those have been going up like crazy. And the next has always been multifamily, because it's safe. You have
People need a place to live.
They need a place to live, but you have also, from the bank standpoint, if the property is stabilized and it's rented basically 90% or 95%, what could happen? A couple people will leave, it'll get vacant, a couple people will come in, but it's not like having a major commercial space on the ground floor, and when that guy goes out, the bank's in trouble or the owner's in trouble. So multifamily is really good, and today a lot of people have actually been selling properties and making a lot of money, been doing 1031s and going into safety places like multifamily. That's been compressing the cap rates and making them even more valuable.
We've been working together for a long time now. I've firsthand seen what you are able to do for your clients through the entire pandemic. What you're able to achieve on the financing side hits home for so many multifamily and mixed use owners. There are so many challenges. What you've done with the liquidity source is built a truly solution-driven process to help. Thanks to our viewers for tuning in, and I invite you to reach out to Stuart, who can give you a free analysis of your portfolio and get you the optimal financing for your needs.
Thank you, Emily, for the kind words, and I look forward to speaking to whoever could use some help.